Sega has just given the order to cancel Hyenas, their upcoming looter shooter Extraction Royale NPC/PvP game with a twist. It's in space or something. You know, one of those games. The reason why this is a big deal is because it's a fairly high profile game with a lot of marketing and production behind it, and from people who were playing in the closed beta, the product actually seemed just about ready to launch. So why cancel a game that's like 99% done when you've already spent the money to make it? Does this cancellation mark the beginning of the end of big studios attempting to enter the looter shooter royale market? Creative Assembly, the studio known for mostly the Total War franchise, was making Hyenas, and today they announced the end of its development. Their official statement mentioned this: consumer area has been rapidly changing, including reactionary decline from the stay-at-home demand in COVID-19 and the economic downturn due to inflation in the European region, and profitability has been lowered mainly in European bases. Basically, the COVID bubble has popped. They acknowledged that it was likely going to result in job losses for developers. Now, I didn't get a chance to play in the closed beta, but I did watch some reviews that actually spoke quite highly of the gameplay, saying that the marketing was really doing a disservice to the product, making it appear to be just another wacky looter shooter, while it actually had a lot more depth and uniqueness to it. And so, if Sega has a potentially good product on their hands, and they've already been dropping big money on the marketing and trailers, and the game is more or less in the final stages of development, why cancel it now? Well, there's a lot of reasons, and frankly, this might be the first domino in what likely will be a lot more cancellations from other studios down the road. Firstly, let's just look at the crazy market saturation right now. On the goofy side of things, there's Fortnite, the juggernaut which is still dominating and expanding its new engine and modding tools backed by Epic Games. And even Epic, with their massive successes and huge game engine, just announced a giant layoff of 900 employees. The entire tech world has been going through a massive pullback due to these changing market conditions, basically the COVID bubble. Call of Duty Warzone has dominated the more military side of Royales. PUBG is still going strong with the hardcore Royale vibe. Apex has the movement Royale market on lockdown. Hunt Showdown has grown a lot in the past several years with a more approachable extraction shooter model, and Tarkov has solidified itself as the most hardcore extraction shooter around. And then there's tons of upcoming games looking to break into these already saturated and dominated markets. I made a video a little while ago talking about napkin math, where studios enter these markets with shoddy research and math that doesn't account for gamers' limited time, and that even getting 5% of a gaming market is incredibly difficult when there's already an established title or titles there. I have no doubt that somebody at Sega recently did the math and realized that they were only going to lose money on the Hyenas launch, and that they would lose less by just canceling the title immediately. And what's scary about this is that there's a lot of upcoming games vying for the exact same market space that may have to make similar decisions. The upcoming game Hawked is a cartoony extraction shooter. The Division Heartland is Ubisoft making another attempt at this specific extraction style market. Both the Finals and Arc Raiders from the new Embark Studios are aiming at these same type of markets. The weird off-the-grid game is aiming to be like a cyberpunk royale. The Marathon reboot from Bungie is aiming for this exact market. Dr. Disrespect's Dead Drop is an extraction shooter, and I'm probably forgetting, another 20 titles all in production, all aiming for the exact same market. Most of these games will simply fail in the long run, and many of them will lose money. When a market is this saturated, breaking into it means that you're going to need to steal players from other competing games that have had more time to refine and improve their formula. It's not impossible, but just extremely difficult and unlikely for the vast majority of them. And we're even looking at games that got in earlier on the Royale craze starting to fail, like the Cycle Frontier finally shutting down after years of trying to be the sci-fi extraction shooter. At the end of last year, Scavengers shut down. Both of those games had high production quality and somewhat unique ideas, but they just couldn't carve out a niche for themselves. Even really high-profile games that got great reviews and great marketing that seemed like surefire wins had to pull the plug, Apex Mobile being one of the most notable titles. What chance did Hyenas actually have, even if it was a fun game by a lot of accounts? If you gave me $1,000 to bet on whether or not Hyenas would be around 2 years years after launch, I would certainly bet against Hyenas' success. That's without playing the game, that's with just watching the trailer and seeing the market saturation and the general response to Hyenas not being overwhelmingly excited. It just didn't seem like it was going to make it. On top of that, it seemed like they were aiming for a paid release for the game, which is extremely difficult to do in a market that's dominated by a lot of high-quality free-to-play titles. Breaking in would be even more difficult, where launching a free-to-play game would cost a lot of money and not necessarily generate a lot of revenue, especially if the game wasn't built around an overly aggressive microtransaction model. There's no way that between the dev costs, server costs, and marketing and further support, Hyenas wouldn't have cost millions of dollars to support through a launch. And ultimately, even if the game did make back some of its development costs on its first sale or some of the microtransactions initially, if the game had to pull its plug later, it ultimately hurts the brand in the long run. So maybe they did sort of a long run calculation and went, you know what, maybe if this is going to recoup some of our development costs but hurt our brand a lot more in the long run, let's just cancel the title in general. And that's likely the decision that was made. We're experiencing not just a Royale, but an overall gaming bubble right now that's kind of adjacent to the tech bubble that happened during COVID. Hiring went bananas during the pandemic with the massive demand for digital products that people wanted while they were locked up in quarantine. And now a lot of those projects are finally getting ready to publish, but they're hitting a market with way less time and way less money. And when I talk to other gamers about 2023 as a year in gaming, it's kind of insane just how many launches we got this year. It might actually be a record-breaking year for high-profile game launches. Certainly it's great for gamers in that we have tons of amazing choices for what we want to play, but because many of us are only buying a handful of games each year, that means that many of the bigger titles are simply going to fail due to saturation. The developers behind Immortals of Avium just laid off a huge chunk of their studio due to their games selling so poorly. So while I don't imagine a lot of gamers are going to be super upset about this one game getting canceled, I think this moment here is one that most developers should be watching carefully, and that there's a good chance many other titles in production are going to follow suit. It's a shame that games can't work more like movies, where if a movie is finished but the holiday release schedule is too competitive, they can shelve that movie for a summer release or even a next year or an entire another year later. Games, on the other hand, don't work like that, and delaying can be extremely expensive since you need to keep the dev team around to actually facilitate the launch. It's a rough time in the tech industry right now and likely will be for a while longer. What are your guys' thoughts on this whole situation? Also, if you want to get your gaming news in a podcast format, check out my new Level With Me podcast, where Matimi and I discuss everything going on in the gaming world. I think you'll like it. And as always, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.